modern medicine has helped to keep some of those people alive, and we're so thankful that you guys are still here with us. But so there is truth to the fact that science is helpful, scientific advances. Nothing wrong with embracing scientific advances that make life easier. The problem comes when people assume that just because we might now know more about electricity or medicine or how machines work, that therefore those people from the past who didn't know those things have nothing, no wisdom, no knowledge to offer us today. It assumes that essentially wisdom and knowledge on all things is based in some way on science, and that there's no advantage to thinking through important things outside of what we have in modernity. So it's a denial that anyone before us could really know anything with any certainty outside of, and this is kind of what it comes to, outside of the exact moment that we live in. No one could know anything with any certainty because of what we know now. And you can see the fallacy in that, because that's a charge that this generation, even though they might assert it now, will deny 10 years from now that they couldn't have known anything 10 years ago. Another aspect of science that's becoming an increasing problem with our thinking when it comes to trusting anything from the past is the rapid development of technology. So while it's been true throughout time that every generation was a little further along than the last generation, the current growth in technological advancements, it favors the young in ways that previous cultures couldn't have known, in the way that it wouldn't have ever been in another culture. Most of us, I think, my age and older, maybe even a little younger, we've been forced to ask our kids or younger people to help us with the same technology because they've just grown up with it and they get it better. I was stunned and kind of horrified the other day when my 3-year-old picked up the remote and changed it to the program he wanted to watch. Like, how did he do that? But he's growing up in this world. And that's the air he breathes. That's what's around him, and that's been the case now for the last couple of decades, which adds an extremely unnecessary, definitely unnecessary. Doug, the high school teacher, can agree with this. Unnecessary arrogance to the younger generation that further influences them in their belief that they really don't have a lot to learn from, a lot of value from those who are older, let alone people who have been dead for centuries. So when you add this type of thinking to the fact that most adults in our country already play into this by acting so worldly when it comes to age, right? They're trying as hard as they can to hold on to youth, being ashamed even of growing older, acting like growing older is something to regret or be saddened about, rather than thinking biblically about age, that there's a crown that comes with gray hair, that with added years comes wisdom. It's tough to speak with authoritative wisdom to a younger generation when we desire to become like them. Why would we expect them to want to learn from the aged when the aged want to be like them and emulate them, be cool like you guys? But even in scientific fields, right? Even in scientific fields, we know that there's benefit to experience and to long periods of time and study in a certain field, and the growing wisdom that comes with age and maturity. So you might want, right? You might want the 20-something-year-old helping you at the, with your iPhone 20 or whatever number they're on. See, I'm uncool. With your iPhone 20, but you want the 50-something doing your heart surgery, right? You don't want the 20-something-year-old kid doing your heart surgery. So there is truth. There is a need for even in scientific fields, understanding that experience is helpful. Another aspect of our culture that causes us to reject the past is consumerism. The fact that goods and possessions have so much importance in people's lives, that their worth and identity are tied up in them. So one of the things that Truman points out in his book is that a rejection of the past is kind of the whole point behind consumerism. The point behind all advertising is to help us see that the more fulfilled life is actually based on something that you don't have yet or that you haven't experienced yet. It's something that awaits you in the future. That's everything that's going to be on display in the expensive Super Bowl ads coming up. They pay so much money. Companies pay so much money because they are certain that through their ads, enough people will be convinced that they need to acquire a new car or new insurance plan or new technology, or they need to see a new movie that's coming up in the future. They look forward to that day. They plan around those things. Something in the future is the key to their fulfillment, not something in the past. That's the air we breathe in our culture. Right? Do you ever, reading in the Bible reading plan this week, do you ever find it odd that one of the signs of wealth and a wealthy gift in the Bible is the gift of changes of clothes? Right? You give him 2 changes of clothes. Whoa, big spender. 2 changes of clothes to that person. I mean, we see that in there in the Bible. Barely anyone in our culture, even those who are financially struggling, wears the same clothes they wore 10 years ago. Most people, I can feel my wife looking at me. I know, I do. But most people don't. Most people replace their computers within 5 years, cell phones under 3 years, 2 years. We're essentially always in the market to upgrade somewhere, to get better, to improve. Again, constantly pushing us to think in terms, newer is better, newer is improved. Therefore, churches and what Christians believe should always be improving. They should always be growing. They should always be upgraded. And again, advertising is geared toward the young and those obsessed with wanting to be young. It's the type of mindset that leads most churches across our country to move further and further away from stable, certain truth and faithful practices when it comes to ecclesiology and how the church and church polity, and try new forms when it comes to worship service and ministry to try and attract those young people. So there's consumerism, and then lastly, when it comes to rejection of the past in our culture, something that kind of comes about as a result of some of that other stuff that we've just mentioned, we need to discuss our culture's rejection of the concept of a human nature. The rejection of the concept of a human nature, which probably used to be kind of unintentional, but is becoming more and more intentional in our culture. This is generally seen in the rejection of the notion that there is anything in humanity that connects people from every time and place. Is there anything common, anything shared? And there's kind of this rejection of that. And that's come as people have begun to have a lot of it's come because people have had access to knowledge of differences in cultures across the world as they gain access to news media and the internet. You see all of these different cultures. It's also becoming the increasing norm to be told that we are all merely a product then of our different cultures and our different cultural upbringings and different practices popular in our culture. So there might be an understanding that humanity shares biology, but who you actually are is dependent on where you're from and the experiences that you've had, the opportunities that you've had or that you haven't had. That's what makes you you. And kind of a rejection of any type of human nature. Furthermore, if some cultures throughout time have said that something is good that others have said is bad, then, how can we appeal to any type of common human nature? And what could one of those cultures possibly say to our completely different culture with any type of authority? So this type of thinking is most commonly expressed in sentiments like, and I'm sure you've heard this, why should I listen to a bunch of old, dead white men when it comes to anything in my life today? Phrases like that are said with confidence, and they're applauded, by the culture and by people in the audience, as if that concept isn't just ridiculous. As if it's not ridiculous that to think that someone's ethnicity or someone's age or someone's time of existence has anything to do with their ability to say something that is universally true. That is universally true. This type of thinking intersects with consumerism, like we just talked about, in the belief that if you're nothing more, if you really are nothing more than a product of your culture, and you're able to choose and live for your own values and what you choose to consume, then if that's the case, then what is it that could actually connect you in any real or meaningful way to anyone from the past or anyone else for that matter? Carl Trueman says, and this is a good quote from his book, if you are master of your own destiny, then you are free to act toward the past and toward other people in the same way you act toward the goods on the supermarket shelf. You buy what appeals to you and leave behind that which does not. So, of course, such a person in this culture has no use for historical documents that are meant to succinctly proclaim universal truth that demands a response. So it's no surprise that so many Christians in such a culture reject the idea of a creed or a confession, finding it constraining or judgmental, but can still in some way embrace the Bible. So we see Christians doing that because it is in this culture, the same culture actually allows them to use the Bible in that same consumer type of way. They just take in and leave what they want or don't want from the Bible. I like this principle. I like these things that Jesus said. I don't like so much Romans. I'm going to just leave that stuff out. I'm going to, the lovey stuff, I like that. It allows us to treat the Bible like that. But a creed or confession says, no, the Bible doesn't mean whatever you want it to mean. It means what it means. It means what God intends it for it to mean. And whatever you feel like being a Christian is, that doesn't actually matter. Being a Christian isn't defined in a way that makes you feel good about yourself and about calling yourself a Christian. The Bible means what the authors intended it to mean, and it's the same thing that faithful Christians throughout centuries have all agreed on. And you can see that reflected in a faithful creed or confession. So, the disdain and distrust of the past is one of those things in our culture that makes it difficult for people to believe that creeds or confessions are of any use to them. I can see I'm going to not have time for any more questions. I really want to get through all of this and not bring this subject into next week also. But So that's the first one, disdain, distrust of the past. Another one would be the culture, the second point would be the culture's overall distrust in the ability for words to communicate clearly and truthfully. And this is something that we've all felt, just like Doug brought up earlier, and I think increasingly feel, as it has just become so common to be lied to by media and by politicians. We're just used to that. Just used to not being told the whole story, just being lied to. Like, everything is fact-checked. We've become used to it. We've become comfortable with it even. It's just commonplace for us to be lied to. I think I was in middle school. I remember George H.W. Bush. I remember it being held against him so strongly because he promised not to raise taxes, and then he did. And that was kind of given that's why he wasn't reelected. He didn't keep his promise. And now we live in a day and age where we just Especially this year, this election year, we're just going to be lied to all the time. We all know we're going to be lied to. They're going to make promises that they're not going to keep. We know they're not. We know it. It's just something we kind of accept. Their words mean really nothing to us. In addition to this, you see Hollywood stars interviewed, and they just kind of say whatever they want as long as they say it with passion and tears, even if they have got no expertise whatsoever, but they really believe what they're saying, that's good enough, and we need to give that some sort of credit. Because look how much they believe it. It's very important to them, clearly, and that should be important to us. So, and we can see even in social media, we see someone say something and they've got their evidence, and they say it passionately and even arrogantly, and then we see someone else say the exact opposite thing with their evidence, passionately and even arrogantly, and then we just kind of scroll past that, like that's a normal thing. Like it's they just both have those views, and like their words mean nothing. Is there real truth or not? So there's so many contexts where words just mean nothing. Words just are not as important in our culture as what someone, and you know this, as what someone believes with all their heart. Or to just know this to be true. Okay. Well, I just can't discount that because he knows it to be true in his heart. Most churches are fine with having people who just come in and maybe they can't get behind a certain thing that you think they should because, they just know in their heart that God wants them to do something else or live for something else or give themselves to something else. Well, so who am I to argue with what God is saying to your heart? We see that same thing. So truth in our culture is become just subjective. It's not dependent on words. And so just think about, again, it comes up all the time, how often TV and movies, the final authority is to just, what? Follow your heart. Follow your heart. And that's what, that's the lesson at the end of every Hallmark movie. In the end, I found out I just needed to follow my heart. And that's what I had to do. So if that is your final authority, then what on earth kind of hope does a 300-year-old document have in guiding someone, especially if it goes against what's in their heart? So there's that, and then another way our culture views words and communication that has a negative effect on the usefulness of confessions is connected kind of back to that consumerism idea, and that's words are of value, but only in a pragmatic way. So pragmatism. Words and books and messages are useful to me only insofar as they help me gain the things that are going to make me happy or become what I know in my heart I'm supposed to be. So you see this mindset increasingly among the young just when it comes to school, right? The kind of, is this going to be on the test? That's what's actually important in what you're teaching me, because I need the grades so I can get the degree so I can move on in my life. The importance of the issue being taught to me only has immediate use to me in whether or not it's going to help me with my grades and my goals. Really not if it's some sort of foundational truth that's my duty to know. It isn't going to help me get further in life. So, and we see that even in Christian circles, right? That leads to the rejection of confessions. Most popular Christian books, the most popular conference topics are on issues that can give real, practical, immediate help to specific issues. They're not primarily about how I can learn deeper, more wonderful truths about God, which, by the way, will benefit you in all of the practical issues of life. But they're topics that can be immediately beneficial to me. So Christian finance books, Christian marriage books, Christian diet books, Christian entertainment guides. Those are the more popular things. Those are the more popular articles on Christian websites. Even books that claim to be about God and your walk with Him, the more popular ones of those aren't actually about God. They're about what God can do for you. So it's not that it's not that there's no place for these kind of topical issues It's that this is the appetite of modern Christianity, and it's one that has lost the real belief that the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. It's lost that belief. Therefore, the best thing, if that's the truth, the best thing I can do in my life, that the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever, then the best thing I can do in my life is know God fully and know God truly, and to learn about who He is and about the world that He has created and His commandments, to know those things well. And that will, in turn, give us a proper filter for how to rightly hear and be motivated and apply truth in all of the topical issues that come about in life. So the fact that God is triune, that Jesus Christ is fully God, fully man, truly God, truly man, the double imputation that we see in the gospel, the fact that Jesus died and rose again, those things are, while they're all probably affirmed by most people who claim to be Christians, in their lives, they're less important to the average Christian from a practical level than whether or not God can help them feel fulfilled in their marriage. That's what's actually, if they're honest, that's what's more important to them. In a context like this culture, it's not so much that most Christians reject the core truths of theology as stated and explained clearly in a confession, so much as they don't really find much use for them in a pragmatic sense. When in fact, it is only in a deeper understanding of theology and in a rock-solid assurance in the truth and reliability of those doctrines that we find in the confessions. It's only in that type of trust, that type of truth, that type of reliability that we find any real hope, any real meaning in any topical study. So if you come to the parenting conference next weekend, which you should, and you come to it, but you come to it without a solid confessional faith, which you shouldn't, and you see the principles discussed up from Travis up here, you see those principles discussed outside of who God is clearly stated to be in the London Baptist Confession, then you will be tempted to hear it all as nothing more than advice for you to just kind of throw into the well of all the other parenting advice that you hear, and in the end make kind of the final call yourself. So to be sure, there's going to be some pointers and advice given out, but instead of filtering it through the filter of your own pragmatism, it should be filtered through what God has revealed about Himself and what is true in His Word and what is true of the church He has placed you in and what is true of the shepherds that He has placed you under. So that's the second part. Okay, I'm doing fine here. We're going to make it. The third part of our culture's problem with confessions and creeds has to do with our culture's anti-authoritarianism. So creeds and confessions are certainly given in an authoritative way. You don't read the London Baptist Confession and be like, this is a nice opinion piece. Creeds and confessions are given authoritatively, and they're given with an assumed authority in the Word of God and in the institution of the church. This is tied to the stuff that we talked about earlier, in that if the final judge of something is ultimately how true you feel it to be, or how useful it can be to you, then that leads to all kinds of suspicions towards anything that tries to force something as subjective as what we believe to be a personal belief on you that you're not comfortable with. Like how dare something force me to change a personal belief? So it's not that our culture doesn't accept authority. This is what's interesting. Our culture readily accepts all kinds of authority, just not authority that claims to be authority. Right? As long as we still have the feeling that in the end we're making the final decision about something, we'll accept all kinds of authorities. Right? See, the authority, like we talked about a while ago, the authority that singers and celebrities have to tell people what is cool and what to wear and what to do. That's an authority that most people, and most teenagers will just willingly bow to. As well as the authority of what the news media might say, or the authority of how many likes or shares a particular tweet or comment has. Like, oh, that adds some weight to what I believe. Look at how many people liked this. That adds value to it. That means maybe I should take it more seriously. So we see those types of authorities, but since we're being influenced in a certain direction and not told outright how we ought to believe, we don't recognize it as an authority so much. We think that we're making the decision. And again, we see the qualifications for being an authority these days is totally wrapped up in popularity and in youth, and requires no expertise whatsoever. No expertise whatsoever on anything that anyone speaks on. So, a good example is the fact that global warming is such a huge issue in our culture today. It has almost nothing to do with what any scientists actually say. It's rather what celebrities have said that scientists say. They're not actually going in and doing all the study for themselves and stuff. It's just, Leonardo DiCaprio said that this scientist, so he's telling me science says it, so I'm going to listen. Right? So the ultimate reason that this culture is so averse to any outside authority that has reason to be listened to and obeyed is not so much because they reject authority as it is because they have bowed the knee to the vastly underqualified cultural authorities. Authorities that have essentially commanded them not to listen to anyone that causes you to question your own heart. And since this authority appeals to our sin nature, well, that's an authority that we like to line up under. So it's no wonder then that we get an anti-authoritarian society that has no problem speaking with their own absolute authority on almost every topic. Isn't that weird? Is it such an anti-authoritarian society? But everyone feels justified in speaking so authoritatively. And if you need proof of that, you just go to the comment section of almost any online article on any slightly controversial subject, and you will see lots of unqualified people speaking with authority. People will read one article on a subject, and they'll suddenly be filled with the confidence to speak on a subject, to speak with such confidence, such arrogance on a subject in a way in which someone with a PhD in that subject wouldn't have even felt like they could speak 20 years ago. They would speak, PhD level people speak with more humility than the 19-year-old who just found out about slavery or something like that. So the idea that years of study, that actual expertise and God-given authority carry so little weight in the minds of so many when it comes to determining whether or not someone is right about a subject that's a relatively new product of our current culture. And it has been so crazy to me since I've been at this church to watch so many people come in and have a meeting with Travis that I'm present at, and they just start talking to him like he's not like they're a fellow elder, or like they have some sort of expertise. They've got no humility. They've got no desire to actually understand the subject better, but they talk like they're kind of recently informed understanding based on a book that they just read, or a podcast that they just heard is on the same level as this seminary-educated pastor of their church with years of ministry experience, and they just come in and start act like this, like it's a negotiation or something to come to terms with kind of a similar thinking. It just shows how that's something that would have. I mean, I couldn't imagine that even when I was a kid. But just in this current culture that we're in, for people to just kind of assume this shared authority that we all can have, and it is really based on this is what I see and I believe in my heart to be true based on whatever I just read. So that leads to this culture's just casual dismissal of the authority of the church. So many people now just see the church as something that I'm a part of and not as an authority that I'm under. Just making major decisions about life without even a second thought about what the leadership of the church might say or what the members of the church, who I'm also accountable to, might say about it. This is seen in like it's just more advice. This is seen in the way in which church shopping is done all of the time. People just move from church to church without a second thought. They break membership covenants without a second thought, and it's because, going back to our second point, the words of that covenant really didn't have that much meaning to me in the first place, it turns out. So since the church is primarily, when they see the church is primarily about helping, them, or helping, I see the church is helping me get out of the church what I want, then of course when someone says something that makes me feel uncomfortable or actually for shame, forbids me from doing something that I wanted to do by claiming some sort of authority, I'm out of here. Who are you to do that? So with that type of attitude so prevalent that kind of neglect for any type of respect for the authority of the institution of the church, any type of respect for the authority in the pastors and the members that one actually sees and interacts with, like if that type of authority is neglected even with people that you see in the church, then of course that person is going to care less about the documents that have been produced by the church throughout history. And closely linked with our culture's anti-authoritarian attitude is the related desire to therefore, as someone mentioned, I think Steve mentioned, or maybe it's John, the desire to try not to exclude anyone. We want to make it easy. We want to include as many people as possible. And creeds and confessions, by their very nature, even though the intent is to positively state what we do believe, the result is that it definitely will exclude anyone who doesn't believe those things. So when we state, I believe this, or we believe this, it does, anyone who can't confirm that or say that along with us, yeah, they are excluded. Indeed, the point of a creed or confession is to say all those who hold this or can fit in these lines, these are Christians, or at least those who can be members of this church, and no one else. It is exclusive. This is one of the chief reasons why our culture has seen such a decline in real churches and a rise in replacing that with a rise in parachurch ministry involvement and churches that adopt more of a parachurch mindset. Since a confession or a creed or a statement of faith is saying without a doubt that some beliefs are true and right and others are false or wrong or even evil, since a confession or a creed or a statement of faith is saying without a doubt that there's true and false, there's right and wrong, there's good and evil. And since anyone who even claims to be a Christian in any sense of the word knows that they know that this has to be true, at least in some extent, right? Hopefully there's few churches that allow someone to come in and say, well, I'm an atheist Christian. At least to that point. So we all know that that's true to some point, but since it is the case, since that's the case, what most Christians then are comfortable with are as broad of a statement of faith or a confession as possible. Again, that's why parachurches are so useful to this culture. Because Christians and because Christians of various commitment levels and denominations are able to work together in certain parachurch ministries, and they can hold Bible studies together on college campuses or give shoeboxes of Christmas gifts to the poor in other countries, or can fight against abortion together, or build wells in some cultures together. All good things, by the way. But because they see success in parachurch ministry, then it tends to cause them to think that the things that have divided denominations for years, and even the things that have deemed some people to be heretics and others not, can those things actually be that important? That's what they think. And therefore, something as specific as the London Baptist Confession is just needlessly divisive. So, again, allowing our current cultural perspectives to be the ultimate deciding factor in what is truly important. So, these are the cultural categories that we are working against in our culture as we try and build on the foundation of being a confessional church. These are things that are so a part of our culture that they go as unnoticed to everyone in our culture as water to a fish. But it is very important as we come to this class that we are aware of them as we think through and study this confession and try and help others see why confessional Christianity is Christianity. And so with that, and we're totally out of time, but next time we're going to talk about, there's a kind of a negative way to begin a class. And I thought about reversing it, but I wanted to take what we talk about next week to lead us into the actual study. So next time we're going to talk about the positive aspects of creeds and confessions and why they are so important, needed, and necessary. But in preparation for next week, I'd like you to think about this common objection to confessionalism that usually comes from a much better place than the stuff we just talked about. It's what Betsy brought up at the beginning. But what is problematic with the common phrase that people use to reject confessional Christianity, the phrase, no creed but the Bible? No creed but the Bible. That's why confessionalism is wrong. So maybe take a little bit of what we've talked about today, think through how you might answer someone who said that, and that's where we're going to begin. We'll begin with that question next week. And with that, now let me close us in prayer. Father God, thank you so much for the opportunity to think through some of these things together. And Lord, I know that there's just not a lot of, when you talk about a subject like this, not a lot of joy coming out of that and kind of being reminded about the disappointment that we might have in our culture. But I pray with that as kind of the black background, the dark background that we look at our confession of faith against, that it would just cause it to be even more bright white, even that it would cause it to stick out even more and become even more precious to us as we think through the joys and we rejoice in and are thankful for the fact that Grace Church is a confessional church that is tied to your church throughout history. And that would be just such a a relief and a joy and something that we exalt in and causes us to bring to glorify you even more. I pray that you would help us all now to be attentive as we come into the worship service, and you would use this worship service here in a little while that we would be rightly convicted by the preaching of your word, that we'd be attentive, that we'd learn, that we'd come into it with hearts ready to worship and glorify you. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. You guys are, kind of dismissed, but you want to be back here in a half hour. Get some coffee. That's what we'll say.